Hello and welcome everyone to the 6th episode of 1,000 Paths to a Career in Arbitration. For those who don't know me yet, my name's Mandy Lee and I'm the founder of Careers in Arbitration. Now this is a very special episode featuring some very special people who I'm very fond of. Not that I'm not fond of all our guests, don't get me wrong, but I'm particularly fond of these guests. Now, before I turn the floor over to our host with the most, it's my job to make a quick housekeeping point. We will be recording this webinar. We are, in fact, recording it now. We therefore ask all participants to kindly make sure that you keep your microphones and your videos switched off during the webinar. Now, the networking session that will follow the speakers' presentations will not be recorded, and so you will have the opportunity then to turn your cameras on and to ask your questions. But we want to begin by focusing on our speakers, so no cameras or microphones for now. Thank you. So let us move on, as always, to more pressing matters, because after all, nobody is here to listen to me. And as always, I have the pleasure of introducing Jessica Rado, the architect and host of our fabulous webinar series. Jessica is a litigator and arbitration attorney based primarily in New York and Italy. She's a member of the Moot Alumni Association core team, where she serves as an editor of the Vindo Bono Journal, and one of the coaches of the Fordham Law School Vis Moot team. And that is all relevant information because this is a very special Vis Moot themed episode. Anyway, without further ado, let me turn the floor over to Jessica and let's get the show on the road.
Thank you so much, Mandy. Thank you for everyone who joined us. I just want to make a brief introduction about the series for those of you who are joining us today for the first time. 1,000 Paths to a Career in Arbitration is a webinar series that wants to explore the many possible ways to pursue a career in the field of international arbitration. We all know it's a competitive field. It seems really hard to get there, but what we hope to learn all together is that there's not just one right path to get there, but there's actually 1,000. And although we don't know if we're going to have 1,000 guests yet, we sure will try. So the theme for today is how can the Vis Moot help us pursue a career in arbitration? And since this is the right season where pre-moots are happening all over town, we want to talk about the Vis Moot competitions of Vienna and Hong Kong. So if you ever participated in a pre-moot or if you ever attended the Vis Moot itself, a lot of the arbitrators mentioned that they are former mooties themselves. So there seems to be a connection there, right? You do the Vis Moot and then somehow you end up working in arbitration. We've also had other guests here at 1,000 Paths who described the Vis Moot as a career-defining moment, being the one law school experience that made them sure they wanted to pursue a career in this field. So it seems that the Vis Moot competition, which celebrates its 31st birthday this year, is an important milestone in one of those 1,000 paths to a career in arbitration. So we decided that even 1,000 Paths has to dive deep into this experience, and who better to tell us than two lawyers who made it all the way through the final round in Vienna and actually brought home victory. So without further ado, I'm happy to introduce our guest speakers, Gyamfi and Augusto García Sanjur, who were part of the Penn State Vis Moot team that won Vienna in the Vienna competition in 2019. Alice is an associate at DLA Piper based in the New York office. She focuses her practice on international commercial and investment arbitration, representing sovereign states, individuals, and multinational companies in arbitrations under leading institutional and ad hoc rules. Ellis is qualified in New York as well as Washington, D.C. Augusto is an associate at Dyler, Floyd & Zatkovich in the London office. Augusto focuses his practice on investment and commercial arbitrations and litigation and has a growing practice in the maritime and international trade sectors. Augusto has acted for both states and private companies in arbitrations under leading institutional and ad hoc rules and is dual qualified in Panama and New York. So Alice and Augusto, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. As usual, we always keep our guests' bios a little bit short because they do so many things that we just don't have the time to list them all, but you will find links to their full bio so you can see all the wonderful things they've done. So since I know everybody's already tired of hearing me speak, I think we should jump straight into the discussion. We're going to do a little bit of a timeline, and we're going to dive deep into the Vis Moot in all of its phases, from learning about the Vis Moot and deciding to apply to join the team to the very last oral argument in Vienna. So the very first thing I'm curious to learn from you guys is, how did you learn about the Vis Moot and how did you decide to get involved? Let's start with Alice. What was your experience?
Sure. First, thank you, Jessica, Mandy, Careers in Arbitration, and my co-counsel, Augusto. It's always a pleasure to see you. I got involved with the BIS through a professor of mine, Catherine Rogers. So Catherine was a professor at Penn State Law. She taught international commercial and investment arbitration. And we had a mentorship program called the Minority Mentorship Program. So she was assigned as my mentor. At the time she was assigned, she was at Queen Mary in London. So, I sent her an email. I told them I wanted to do international law broadly, but I didn't really have a good sense of what in international law. I certainly had never done any international arbitration work ever before. And so we had lunch and I talked, Catherine was like, well, what kind of practice do you think you want to have? Do you understand the differences and, all the different career paths? And I was like, no, give me, like a bird's eye view. And she kind of went through things you could do that are commercial, criminal, all of these kind of things. And she was like, well, have you ever heard of or thought of international arbitration? And I was like, what's that? So she kind of gave me a primer. And what she said was that if James Bond practiced law, he would probably practice international arbitration. It's very sophisticated. It's very high pace. Arbitrations take place in very cool destinations all over the world, and you're almost always dealing with, multiple points of laws, various treaties you're interpreting. So it's very high level, strategic and sophisticated work. And I was hooked. So she asked me to sit in on a practice for the Vis Moot team the year prior to me, and just told me to consider it. So that was my introduction to the Vis Moot, over coffee and bagels with Catherine Rogers.
Well, sign me up. That sounds awesome. And I love the James Bond quote. Augusto, what was your experience? How did you get involved?
Yeah, so thank you first of all for having us here. Well, my journey started, I think, in Panama when one person told us if we wanted to have a trip to Uruguay, and I had never traveled before, and I said yes, of course. And they said, well, there's this competition in something called international arbitration, which I thought it was pretty interesting. I had not studied that in law school, but I was just curious about it and see how it was international, commercial, civil. And I just started going to the practices, and then I carried all the way to the competition in South America. I did that twice. And then I was curious to see how it was going to work in the US. So when Penn State was recruiting, they contacted me and they were interested in seeing me trying out for the Vis Moot team up there, and that's what I did. I just thought that I wanted to keep honing my experience and my skills, and that's how I started this Vis Moot journey, as people call it.
It really is a journey, and we'll see why as we go through all the steps. So many of our Careers in Arbitration followers are students who are still in law school and may be very interested in joining the Vis Moot team to kickstart their career. But we know that generally speaking, the teams are very small. So for a law school, there may just be 4 or 6 slots for competitors in the Vis Moot team. And so oftentimes, if not always, there is a selection process that may be more or less hard. So Alice, can you tell us what the selection process was like for you, and what do you think makes a candidate stand out?
Yes, as you know from your experience with Fordham, a lot of the moot courts, especially for U.S. teams, are are domestic. So when you're making the case to the university, you know, hey, we want to go to DC for a competition, they're like, oh, you know, we can find that in the budget. But when you say we're going to go to Vienna and we're also going to go to you know, a pre-moot in Serbia, and then we may also go to Hong Kong, you really have to justify it to the university. So our team was, I think, small for that reason as well. For us, the selection process, our coaches gave us the problem for the following year, an abbreviated portion of the problem. You reviewed it, digested it, and then you had to come prepared to do, I think it was, you know, a 5 or 10-minute oral argument based on the prior year's problem. So, you know, making the commitment over the summer while you are probably doing some kind of legal internship to review a 50-page problem and put together an oral argument is, you know, no small feat, and it shows dedication. So for those people who were just willing to make that commitment, I think that says something. And then, you know, to do it in front of a panel of your peers, I think it takes a lot as well. So that was our process. You had to actually deliver an abbreviated oral argument based on the prior year's problem. I think what can help you stand out, and I know we all know this, but I can't underscore preparation enough. Speak to the people who were on the team before. Talk to them about how they prepared even for the tryout process. And importantly, don't, you know, reinvent the wheel. When you're doing your, you know, audition for the Vis Moot, I doubt the coaches are looking for you to come up with some novel argument that no one in the prior year had ever come up with, right? They were dealing with that problem for an entire year. What they're really looking to see is, can you, having read this 50-page brief, really dissect it, understand the points of law, and present a logically consistent, strong oral argument with some measure of confidence and capability, right? They're looking to see if you can do that. So make sure you are prepared in that you've gone over the memoranda for other teams, the team that won the memoranda award, look at prior competitions and kind of see what you can gain from those other places. And then focus your audition on making sure that you are delivering an oral argument that is tight, one that is strong, and one that, you know, is legally supported, but, you know, portray as much confidence and you know, competency as you can. I think that's where you should really focus your time for your audition.
That sounds like great advice.
Yeah.
I hope everyone is taking notes. Slightly different question for you, Augusto, just to underscore your sort of a different approach. So you participated with Alice, but Alice was a JD student and you were an LLM student at the time at Penn State. So just so our audience knows, this is not necessarily the rule. Sometimes law schools do not open the participation in the Vis Moot to LLM students. Other times it's open, you just go through the same selection process. So everyone should really double check with their school what the rule is. But Augusto was able to participate. And my understanding is that you went through the same selection process. And my question for you is, did you feel nervous or were you concerned about the fact that you will be competing with JD students? And what do you think makes an LLM candidate stand out in a strict selection? I'm sure everything that Alice said applies, but do you think there's maybe something else that an LLM student should consider when preparing?
Yeah, I don't think I was nervous to compete with JD students because they had not arrived to the law school yet. So the law school was empty when we participated in the tryouts, and that because everyone was, I don't know, in the summer or something, having a good time. But great. Yeah, it was interesting to participate. And I was thankful for Penn State for opening the space to LLMs because it's really a great experience in order to share all of those moments with your JD classmates. I think for our LLM, what really makes you stand out is knowledge of the substance of international arbitration and law in general. Because if you're an LLM that means usually that you finish your studies back home. And the JDs have not finished that yet. So for you to come with a little bit more of experience, to be able to share that with your team, I think that really makes you stand out. Because if you know the law basically by heart and you know how it works and you know how all the pieces can go together, that really allows you to provide that extra degree of experience to your JD teammates.
That's a really good point. I think I think it's really good advice. LLMs should embrace their experience, and maybe they have specific knowledge because maybe they're already focusing on international arbitration, and maybe a JD student hasn't yet. A lot of times international arbitration is not a regular class in law school.
Exactly.
So some people may face international arbitration for the first time when they see the problem. So an LLM student should embrace that and use that as a strength when trying out.
Yes.
It's absolutely great advice.
Because,
so let's move on with, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, usually when LLMs try out for the Vis, they usually have a notion of what international arbitration is. So they don't come with zero knowledge. So they should apply that in favor of the team.
Right, absolutely. So let's move on with our Vis timeline. So the problem is released, that's usually around October, and it's time to start drafting. And as we just said, since international arbitration is often not a common subject, sometimes students don't actually know how to approach this kind of research because they're used to researching materials for their own jurisdiction, and now they have to open this to international sources. So how did you guys approach this new kind of research? Let's start with Alice.
Sure. This is a really good segue actually into what you and Augusto were just talking about, from the perspective that for a JD student, if you're trying out for the Vis, you're likely in your second year. Your first year was all the common core classes, so court, torts, contracts, criminal law, right? You have not taken any elective courses. So not only is research into any substantive area of law new, research into international arbitration specifically is new. A few things that our team did. First is that everyone on the Vis Moot team was required to take Catherine Rogers's Intro to International Commercial Arbitration Law class. So that class gave you a very good kind of foundation in international commercial arbitration. And as the semester goes on, you feel like, okay, I've really got a grounding. But as the semester goes on, you're way deep in the problem by that point, right? So by the time she's covered the areas of law where you're like, oh my goodness, I wish that I knew that 2 months ago, you probably learned that from doing your Vis kind of experience anyway, but that class is still, I found it was still very helpful to take while we were in our Vis process. The other thing is something our coaches actually did that I thought was really helpful when you're learning how to research a new substantive area of law. They took about, I want to say, a month and a half, maybe 2 months, and they just did a basics and international arbitration training. So every time we met, we had a new area of training, essentially, where they were just teaching us about the law that applied. So 1 week we did, the procedural law versus the substantive law. Another meeting we did institutional rules. Here are the common ones. This is what they do. Another week we did UNCITRAL model law. Another week we did CISG. Here is, the most commonly used, the most common way that the CISG is used. So they did a very deep dive into the arbitration universe. And I think if you're here and you are a coach, that is one of the most helpful things that you can do for the people who are a part of your team. Orient them in the international arbitration universe and help them to get situated and more comfortable. I recall our coach Catalina going to the Kluver website, literally typing in Kluver arbitration, and she helped us navigate the webpage, because when I tell you we were new, Jessica.
Yeah.
So she had a list of the most common research websites. sent it all to us, and went on those websites just so that, when she gave us a research assignment, that wasn't the first time we were logging on. She literally took us to the websites, helped us navigate it, showed us, these are cool tips and tricks. So I think the combination of having that, substantive course where, you're as part of your law school curriculum, and having a coaching team who is just drilling in and helping to orient you in the international arbitration universe gets you prepared. And so you feel more comfortable doing the research because you know exactly where to go.
Sounds very useful, even though it's a lot of stuff to learn. Class and the research training sounds like a lot. Augusto, do you have anything to add? Any other strategies or any other approach that you took to this research?
Yes, just read a lot. I think the clue arbitration is great, and I also see now that some intelligence houses like Jusmundi and others, they are trying to open a little bit the space for the Vis Moot. So if you are part of a university that do not have a lot of access to books, I'll just call, email any of these houses in order to get as much access you can get in order to have sources, awards, judgments, and books to be able to nurture your memorials, because that really makes a difference. I think something that really helped me was that I decided to spend some time spring break writing a law review article, basically inspired in the problem of the Vis Moot that year. So that allowed me to be able to compare the Vis Moot problem through different legal systems, and allow me to have a more comprehensive view of all the issues they interacted, both in the procedural aspect and substantive aspect. So when the oral rounds came in, I was already ready to discuss for 2 hours every of those issues. And it was more a thing of being able to frame specifically what was required for that specific argument that I was involved in. But I think it's a really good sparring, and try to get the momentum to also write something and get something published as a memory, souvenir.
You just had the extra time, right? You had nothing going on, so you could just write an article.
Yeah,
Why not?
I didn't have any destination for spring break, so I was like, okay, maybe that'll
Can
be.
I tell you how impressive Augusto is? So he was the only member of our team who was able to deliver both the procedural and substantive argument. So when he's saying like, oh, I, just did this article, he is for real. Like only member of our team who could give you both the procedure and substantive arguments and answer questions, and knew it by heart.
Wow, that is really impressive. Did you end up arguing both at the actual competition? Both
No,
procedure and merits?
no, just in some practice where I think Alice or one of our other procedural colleagues was not available for some reason, so they just needed one procedural person, and I just stepped in. I was kind of like,
Wow.
freestyling a little bit, but I think it's useful to be able to know what your co-counsel is gonna say as well. So you're gonna be able to help her or him better, because you know what's coming in, so you know what answers to get to them. But yeah, it was quite useful.
I bet. All right, we're moving on with the timeline. The memos are submitted, and it's time to start practicing the oral arguments. So again, here, schools have different approaches. So some schools may have separate teams where some students only focus on the written part, and then others focus on the oral arguments only. And other schools have the same team who works for the whole year. They research, they draft, and then they argue. And Augusto and Alice are one of those teams. So you guys were involved from the very beginning till the very, very end with the final round in Vienna. So how did your preparation regime change once you started focusing on the oral arguments and you had to approach the pre-mooting season? Let's start with Augusto this time.
Yeah, we started from the beginning. Both Alice and I and all our team were oralists. So the team coaches decided to make us all oralists at the beginning. So we were all able to help the team, but we were also able all to learn how to plead both substance and procedure, and also how to write the memo. So in that case, we all get able to get the experience because, even if you passed the tryout, you also sometimes have nerves. You are not perfectly speaking in public, or maybe you're not the perfect writer, but that really helps you and really puts you on the spot because you don't have any way out, you don't have any escape. You have to be able to sit there and deliver the best because our coaches also decided to put a score system in order for us to have a score every single time we played. So in that case, we were able to see the development in each of our pleadings. For example, at the beginning, I was not one of the best in the team. I was even rejected when I did the tryout. But during the time, I was able to see my improvement and be able to step up my game, step up my skills, and be able to improve every day. And I think it's beautiful to see how you have improved all the way and being constant learning. And then at the end, the coaches said that even if they had scores, um, they reserved the right to appoint or nominate the person that was going to speak in Vienna and the others as well. And by the time we had practiced so much between each other that we were able to really concentrate as a team and support anyone who would plead in Vienna.
Very interesting. Anything to add, Alice, to the new regime after it was time to focus on the oral arguments?
Yes, only that even though, as Augusto says, everyone who made the team was a presumptive oralist, because we were one team and everyone did everything, we never really stopped researching, right? So we didn't have a point where we were like, okay, it's time to focus solely on the oral arguments. After every practice round, there was undoubtedly some kind of research that needed to be done, some way that the argument needed to be changed. And so, as the oralist, you were also responsible for doing that research, going back, drilling in, making the changes. And even those who, were not oralists in Vienna, it wasn't like they were the supporting act, right? Like everyone was responsible for doing substantive work. The process that Augusto is talking about in terms of the scoring process, I would be interested to know for you all who are on here, what process that your teams take, if they have one team that does everything, like how coaches decide who's going to argue. So put it in the chat and let us know. But I think that if you're here and you're a coach, I like that system because I think it's very transparent. As Augusto is saying, it's beautiful to see your progress, but it's also good to know exactly where you are in comparison to, the other people on your team, especially if you have a team where everyone wants to argue, everyone, wants to be the one who is delivering the argument in Vienna. I think it would be quite a shock if you're just going along and you're doing the best you can and you arrive and they say it's not you, and you think, oh my goodness, I thought I've been doing a great job this whole time. So it's a very transparent process. You know at all times where you are situated in comparison to your other teammates. And so there's no surprise at the end of the day when the coaches say it's going to be these, 3 or 4 people who are going to argue. But let us know if, you're here and you did it a different way. I'd be curious to know.
Yeah. And I also think it also rewards consistency throughout the whole year because the competition starts and the problem drops, and you and your team are able to start researching, and then memo 1, and then memo 2, and then all the practice rounds. So you really have to be able to be a team throughout the year and not only fourth trip to Vienna.
Of course, of course. Well, it sounds like a very interesting system that, even though it sounds intimidating at first, because the thought of being scored at every single round sounds like a lot of work. But I guess, after hearing you guys explain it, it does sound like it's a transparent, and like Augusto said, it really tracks your progress, because we all know that the one way to improve is to track your progress and see how you're doing, right? So it sounds like a very useful method that maybe more schools should actually consider. But hopefully either in the chat or during the Q&A, we'll hear about other Moody's and what their system has been so far. So we're almost there. The pre-moot season is over, your bags are packed, and jet lag is setting in. You're in Vienna. Very odd question for you, Alice, but I like it like this. So I'm curious to know what your day was like in Vienna, meaning how did you and your teammates decide to balance your time between doing what I imagine you did a lot of practice rounds among yourselves, debriefing after unofficial rounds and the actual general rounds in the competition, and hopefully also finding some time to enjoy the city and doing something fun? Because normally one would say you keep arguing, and then once you get eliminated, well, the rest of the trip is paid for, and that's when you visit Vienna. But you guys didn't have that. You guys were busy until the last day. So I'm kind of curious to know how you balance all of these things.
Yeah, that was a period in time where I was grateful to be busy. But, and I hope this is not controversial, but we didn't have a lot of balance. We were practicing all day. Our mindset before even going to Vienna was that we were there to win. It got to about February. Augusto, correct me if my timeline is wrong, but I think it was February. We had done a number of pre-moots. When you get to like the February, early March time, you are doing a practice round every day, if not multiple practice rounds a day. And a lot of the teams that we were practicing in were not in North America. So we're practicing with teams in India and, the Middle East and all over. So we're doing the 12 hours ahead and stuff like that. We were exhausted. And we may not have been doing our level best. And so our coaches just had a team meeting and they were like, guys, we know you guys are better than the performance you're putting forward. We just want to know from you all, what are your intentions regarding Vienna? And they had everyone go around, all 8 of us, and say, how far do you want to get in the competition? Because if it's, we just want to go and have a wonderful learning experience, then they didn't think it was, fair or right to push us the way they were pushing us if we all just wanted to do our best. And Augusto and I were the only 2 team members who said we wanted to win. And that was our express intention. So we stated our intention before we even got to Vienna. So our mindset was that we are there to do well. We are there to do, to win. So we dedicated as much time as possible to preparing. We'd wake up, have an hour or 2 of what I call independent study. So I'm just going over my arguments, I'm delivering it out loud. And then we meet as a team with the coaches and we go over the arguments, what research needed to be done, what we needed to accomplish for the day. Then our coaches would typically split us up. They would do independent work with procedure. Another coach would do independent work with substance. So we did several hours of work with each coach, and then sometimes we'd switch. And then in between there, we'd have like a lunch or something. Someone would cook, we'd order something, and then we'd have a practice round most days with another team, or just an internal practice round. We'd break for dinner, and then after dinner, we would meet as a team again to do another debrief, discuss how that round just went, any research that we needed to do, any arguments that needed to be changed. So, that was our daily process before the general rounds. We did have a couple of nights where we went out. I don't want to misrepresent, Jessica. It wasn't like, 100% work, but I remember a couple times we were out at a team lunch or something, and Catherine was with us and another one of our professors, Judd Matthews, and we'd be talking to them and I'd say, Catherine, I'm not really getting this argument. And she'd say, okay, let's go back. So I'd go back with her early from a team dinner. She'd give me a couple hours to help me sort through this legal issue. And then I'd feel a lot better, right? So it was really a heavy emphasis on preparation. And I would say 95% of our time was focused on preparing. And I didn't really have like a night about the town until the day after the competition.
Well, I guess Vienna just looked completely different after you won, so maybe it wasn't so bad. But perhaps, Mandy, you should write down. We need to do an hour balance episode about balancing life and work during the
Yes.
festival, because it sounds like the Penn State team didn't get that very well. But no, I mean, jokes aside, it takes a lot of work to win. So it makes sense that you guys were so focused since before you landed. And you were dedicating most of your time to preparation.
Yeah.
Hopefully you were able to still enjoy the city afterwards a little bit. But yeah, it does makes absolute sense. Slightly different question for you, Augusto. So I'm curious to learn, even though you kind of like mentioned it a little bit already, I'm curious to learn about how your strategy changed, if it did change, after every elimination round. Sometimes the team is prepared for the general round. You already know who you're arguing against, what side you're arguing, so you may plan for that. And then once you advance, you sort of need to decide right there on the spot who's going to argue, what approach you're going to take, if you're going to prefer one argument over another. So I'm a little bit curious about how that strategy changed, and if it was a collective choice by the team, or if it was the coaches who decided who was going to argue the next round.
Yeah, it was both the coaches and the team, but mainly the coaches. I think during the Vienna arguments, Alice was procedure about claimant and respondent. I was Merit's respondent, and our colleague Mohammed Tulic, he was for claimant. And yeah, that was pretty good. The balance of responsibilities, but also the structure of the arguments were all decided by the team. You know, before each round, one team member will say, we need this, we need that, and that will change the whole game for each round. So we were really able to adapt. And that comes back to the fact that every single member was important. All of them had something to say, because when you were there pleading, I remember when I was pleading, I will deliver the argument and I will be thinking about the person who told me this, which will be one person of my team that told me about it during lunch or during a walk or whatever. And that was really good. I think just one comment on Alice, that we worked a lot in Vienna. That was true, but I think we're also lucky because we were really good friends at the end of the journey. So we're able to have fun between each other and be able to practice and have fun in the meantime. I remember that my teammates, when I was going to argue for a round, they would ask me a bunch of questions in really pressuring times, and they will try to see if I ticked or if I got stressed or if I got mad, just to be able to test the level of pressure that I was able to overcome. So that was good, and that was also part of the preparation that we had there.
I think you both touched on a very important topic, which is teamwork. And teamwork is actually one of the, usually it's like on the arbitrator checklist, so to speak, because usually your score also depends on your teamwork, on the teamwork that you show during your argument, right? The fact that your teammate is turning pages for you, they're letting you know that you only have 1 minute left in your argument, and things of this sort are usually something that the arbitrators notice and appreciate when they're scoring you. So it's great that you emphasize that, and it's also great that you emphasize how it's a team effort. So everybody's involved, everybody's a part of it. And I'm glad to hear you guys became really good friends and that there was a lot of bonding. I mean, that's part of what this is supposed to be, at least. It's not, just practicing for 12 hours a day with no sunlight, but it's also getting really close with your teammates and making, lifelong friends, basically. Because look at you guys, it's years after, you're in 2 different countries and you're still like really good friends. So it's great to see that. So we're almost there with our questions. Now let's talk about this final round, since you guys are one of the few people who actually made it all the way up there. So I'm curious to know how you manage what I can only imagine you were incredibly excited, but also maybe a little bit scared that, one mistake might cost you the work that you've done up to that point. So I'm curious to know how you manage all of these things and still delivered the winning performance and the greatest performance over, I don't know how many teams you had last year, but I'm guessing at least 350 teams from all over the world. So Augusto, how did you approach that last round?
Um, I was quite calm, and because I really felt that I was prepared. My mindset was just another day in the office, basically, or another day fleeting. The thing is that we practiced so much that we were almost ready for anything, and we knew our pleadings by heart, and also because we practiced so much that we asked between ourselves so many questions. I think we exhausted all of the possible questions that could have been asked. So we were pretty prepared for that. I think our coaches really taught us how to handle pressure, how to handle a lot of questions, because in the heat of the moment, you get all of these questions and you ask yourself, why are they asking me all of this? They don't have anything else to do. But I think the mindset is the arbitrators are just persons that are there to help you win the case, and you need to clarify things to them and show them the way instead of just people that are just there to make your life miserable. I think something that people should do and something that our coach Will told me to do is prepare your pleading, record yourself saying it, and then when you're at the gym, when you're walking, when you're on the bus, you hear yourself, because in that way you're able to basically know what's next and know your speech by heart. I will remember that when we were traveling to Vienna, Alice was really sick, like super sick, but she was rehearsing her pleading in the plane and during the trip, and that really shows dedication. So when we reached the final round against Ottawa, I just thought that it was a gift from God, and we were not gonna let it slide, or we were not gonna just let it escape from our hands. So we just did our best. And to be honest, that was just one of our rounds after so many rounds of preparation. And it was also beautiful to see how when I receive a question, I will remember exactly the practice round when I got that question asked before. So I was able to see all those moments coming together, all my teammates' ideas in order to deliver a good presentation and just really enjoy it, because at the end of the day you have to enjoy it. Every single minute you're there, you only have 15 minutes. So instead of trying to run out 15 minutes, I want to get out of here, just try to enjoy it calm. And I really think that the arbitrators were able to tell that we were having fun, and I think they also enjoy our presentations because of that.
That's great. Anything to add, Alice?
Just that I co-sign everything Augusto said. Part of managing that last round had less to do with that last round and more to do with the prior 8 months that we had spent preparing for that last round. Another piece I would say is that is really the time where you have to lean on your co-counsel. Every single round that I had with Augusto, one, we just kind of had an understanding between the two of us. We would hold hands and have a little prayer. That is something that just calmed us down immensely. We would, give each other a little pep talk. But even as I'm arguing, in addition to the normal things that you would expect for your co-counsel to tell you, like, you're a bit fast. I think you should go to, this argument, wait for flip, those substantive things. He would also give me a note that said, you're killing it. You're on the roll. Great answer to that question, right? And I would do the same. So having that, every now and again, getting that note that's saying, you're doing great and things like that really helps to just keep you going. So to the extent you can, if you know you're going to be arguing in Vienna or your coaches have already paired you up, it helps to have a great relationship with your co-counsel, to know them really well and to trust them. because there were a couple times that we're starting around and my hands are doing this. They're shivering.
True.
And Augusto would put his hand on top of my hand and be like, "You're fine, you're good, everything is okay,"
Yeah.
right? So leaning on your co-counsel is so important.
True. And it's okay to get nervous and everything. I mean, we're all human, but every round you're kind of warming up a little bit, and then you can have just a sip of water to be able to calm down. Okay, you got a sip of water. I'm still here. I'm still alive, and just be able to enjoy it. But yeah, the nerve just go somewhere else when you prepare and you kind of get tired of the same thing, and it's just another day in the office. And something also that I would say, what Alice was saying at the beginning, of being able to prepare yourself mentally and read the problem and talk to the people of the Vis Moot team of the year before. I would watch all the Vis Moot finals that I was able to see on YouTube, just because I wanted to see how the good ones did it. And it was so funny at the end when I saw the same place, and I was like, I felt that I have been here before, because all of that. And I think you also kind of manifest good things in your life if you see yourself there, more or less.
Great. It's also interesting to hear how we heard like a common theme, right? So because Alice was saying at the very beginning, even when you're trying out for the team, you should try and talk to someone who tried out the year before. And now, Augusto, you're saying you should watch who won. You should watch what they did to get there. So it sounds like looking at someone who's been through it, looking at someone who succeeded in what you're trying to accomplish is a great way to get started and to push you and to get you better and better. So I think you guys have delivered great tips. So on how to prepare for the Vis Moot, like very, really, really good. And I have come to my final question, which is maybe the most important of all. And my question for you guys is, how do you think this incredible Vis Moot experience that you just told us about has influenced your career as an arbitration attorney? Let's start with Alice this time.
I think influence is putting it mildly. The Vis Moot really changed my perception of what I was able to do. Like, that was the first time I thought, I may be good at this. At no point going from elimination round to elimination round, I never thought we had it in the bag. Don't get me wrong, we'd worked very hard. Every single round we did our best, but I never thought, oh yeah, we're making it, ever. So, coming out on the other side and being on the final stage, it was just like, how did we get here? So it really, really, really changed my career and the way I looked at what I was capable of doing. I think the way the experience influences your career as an arbitration attorney is in two ways for me. The first is the ability to look at a problem, dissect it, pull out the salient facts, and craft a strong, legally consistent, well-supported argument is actually a very underrated skill. And it takes a lot of years to master, a lot of time. And what you have the opportunity to do in the span of 1 year is really understand how to do that, what it means to construct an argument. And this is something that people spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in training to learn how to be able to do. And you are getting a masterclass in it through the Vis. Don't take it for granted and really try and get the most out of that experience. I know people say there's a Vis Moot style of pleading. I would argue that it is a foundational style for pleading, right? The way we introduce a text before we explain why it matters for our position. So helpful. I've been in hearings where, counsel they've said the name of the case and now they're giving me, this position on the case. I don't know the court. I don't know the year. I don't know why why you think it would matter to the tribunal if you've not given me the foundation for why you've introduced this case and why it should care to the tribunal, right? Like the Vis Moot pleading style, I think is elementary, my dear, right? If you can get that down, after everything else is polished, right? Everything else is we can build on it and embellish, but the Vis Moot style of pleading, I really do think is tight, it is structured, and it is clear. The other influential portion is how much work you do with the various legal texts, the CISG, the ancestral model law, you know, the institutional rules, whatever governing law applies, you get an opportunity to understand how all of these bodies of law fit within one another. And someone like Augusto, who spent a great deal of time with the CISG, you know, I work with practitioners who have never touched the CISG until they were a senior arbitration attorney because they never had a case that involved it. And then all of a sudden, everyone's knocking on doors. Has anyone worked with the CISG, right? But Vis Mooties are like waiting for that opportunity.
Sure.
Because they work with the CISG, they know how to use it to interpret a provision. So I think that interplay, understanding how those bodies of law work with one another and how to use them effectively is also a really excellent, you know, experience that you get from the Vis.
What about you, Augusto?
Yeah, I agree. I think at the end of the day, the practice of law, I think the only thing that the Vis Moot is missing is just cross-examination. After that, it's quite complete, because if you really put effort in writing and you get feedback, and I will try to tell Vis Moot is because I think there's a perception that the only fun part is the oral argument. I'll say that the writing part is really understated, and you should really be able to put a lot of effort into that and try to get as many juries to that memo as possible in order to really improve your legal writing, because at the end of the day, it's a lot that you're gonna do when you are in an office. And for me, it was really an opportunity, because I went to the US and I wanted to pursue a career in arbitration, and I just saw this as a maximum exposure that I could get for me in order to get a job. I remember I wrote to Alice, to the whole team, like 2 months after, like, yeah, we did all of this because we wanted something better for ourselves, something better for our families. We wanted to have a job in this really competitive world, and we put a lot of effort into it. And also, even though you're a law student, it's really good for you to leave your signature and your bookmark there saying, I was here, your blueprint, in order to be able to show the arbitration world that you are a person that can do a great job. Even if you get the job, or even if you don't get the job, immediately after the Vis, you have to know that you have been going there, you have done a lot of preparation, you have met a lot of people that may be able to help you at a later stage in your career, and that it has given you a lot of potential in order to show that to other Vis Mooties that are gonna be able to relate to that experience as well. But for me, I was clear from the start that it was an opportunity, and I did not envision what was gonna happen next, but I'm grateful for it.
Well, thank you guys so much. We got to the end of our questions. I'm sorry I kept you so long, but there was just so many things I was curious to know, and I'm sure our attendees were also just as curious. So we got to the end. We will move to the Q&A in a moment, but since that portion will not be recorded, we're now going to close the actual recording. So I'll give the floor back to our one and only Amanda Lee for closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Thank you, as always, to our host with the most and to our absolutely fabulous guests. I have, during my arbitration career, had the privilege of working with both of them on a project, and I can definitely confirm that their hard work and dedication, as evidenced by their Vis Moot victory, was definitely a sensible investment in their future careers. They really do know their stuff. They've got the absolute right work ethic to succeed in this field. And frankly, it's the people who are prepared to work the hardest who are the ones who are going to succeed in this incredibly competitive field. That's just the way it goes. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We are going to move swiftly on to the Q&A so that you all have the opportunity to bend the ears of our speakers. And for those who haven't joined us today live for 1,000 Paths, we're very sorry that you're going to miss out on the Q&A section. So we hope you will tune in for that section next time.